The text arrived at 8:12 in the morning. It read, "He's mine." The sender was not my husband. It was the woman sitting in my weekly strategy meeting. I did not cry. I just archived the evidence and rerouted my paycheck. Dylan thinks he is hiding a cheap affair, but I am about to expose a fraud disguised as a marriage. And I am going to do it by sharing my screen. My name is Megan Hart. I am 33 years old, and I live in a subdivision of identical colonial-style houses just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. To the outside observer, my life is a series of perfectly executed checklists. I work as the operations strategy lead at Black Ridge Signal Works. My professional existence is defined by a singular talent. I can look at a chaotic, bleeding system, identify the inefficiencies, and restructure it until it runs with lethal precision. I do not rely on hope. I rely on data. My husband, Dylan Cross, is the sales director at Ventrellis Dynamics. Dylan operates on a different frequency. He lives for the optics. He is a man constructed entirely of networking dinners, golf handicaps, and the kind of firm handshakes that suggest integrity without actually promising it. To Dylan, perception is not just reality. It is the only currency that matters. He believes that if you look successful, the actual work is secondary. For the last 7 years, our marriage has functioned less like a romantic partnership and more like a corporate calendar. I managed the back end, I paid the mortgages, balanced the retirement portfolios, organized the social schedule, and ensured the house was silent when he needed to sleep. Dylan managed the spotlight. He took the credit for our lifestyle, treating my competence as a natural resource he was entitled to mine without limit. I was the infrastructure. He was the brand. I accepted this division of labor because I valued stability. The shift occurred last Saturday night. We were hosting a dinner party for 3 other couples. The kitchen smelled of roasted garlic and expensive wine. Dylan was holding court near the island, swirling his glass of Cabernet, recounting a story about a client acquisition that I knew for a fact was mostly fabrication. One of his colleagues, a man named Greg, asked him how he knew I was the one he wanted to marry. Dylan laughed, a loud, practiced sound that bounced off the granite countertops. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders, squeezing just hard enough to be possessive but not hard enough to bruise. "Megan," he said, grinning at the room. "Look at her. Megan was the safe choice. You know how it is. Greg, you need someone steady at home so you can go out and conquer the world. She is my safety net." The room chuckled politely. I felt the blood drain from my face, but my training kicked in instantly. I smiled. I took a sip of my wine. I played the role of the supportive, steady wife. But inside my head, I opened a new mental ledger. I labeled it liabilities. I started listening differently after that night. I noticed how he framed every anecdote about us. I was never a partner in his stories. I was a prop. I was the silent figure in the background who made his chaotic genius possible. I began to detest the character he had written for me. A week later, Dylan came home buzzing with a frantic sort of energy. He tossed his suit jacket onto the entryway bench, knowing I would hang it up. Big news coming down the pipe. "Meg," he said, pouring himself a drink before he even loosened his tie. "The VP of regional sales position is finally opening up. It is mine to lose." He turned to me, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took a drink. "Listen, I need everything here to be spotless for the next few months." He said, "No issues, no drama. I need you to be perfect. This is promotion season. I need to look like the guy who has his life perfectly under control." "Can you handle that?" I looked at him. I realized then exactly what I was. I was not a wife. I was a collateral asset. He was selling his domestic stability to his superiors to buy his way up the ladder, and I was the proof of that stability. "I can handle it," I said. He nodded, satisfied, and walked past me to the living room. I did not follow him. I went into my home office and sat in the dark. I did not cry. I did not throw a vase against the wall. I did what I do best at Black Ridge. I engaged my analytical mode. I looked at the situation as a failing operational strategy. The return on investment for this marriage had plummeted. The partner was acting in bad faith. If this is a system, I thought, where is the leak? It was 10 o'clock at night. Usually, if Dylan was not in the room with me, I would send a text to ask if he needed anything. I looked at my phone on the desk. The screen was black. I picked it up, felt the cold weight of the device in my hand, and then set it back down, face down. I did not text him. I did not ask where he was or what he needed. For the first time in 10 years, I did not care. The silence in the room was not lonely. It felt efficient. I arrived home early on a Tuesday because a client rescheduled our operational review. It was 2:45 in the afternoon. The house was usually silent at this hour, a pristine museum of suburban success that I spent my weekends cleaning. But as I placed my keys in the ceramic bowl in the foyer, I heard a voice drifting down from the second floor. Dylan was in his home office. The door was slightly ajar. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I did not call out. I did not walk up the steps to greet him. I simply stood there, my hand gripping the banister, and listened. I know it is tight," Dylan said. His voice was dropped to a register I rarely heard anymore, soft, reassuring, almost tender. "Don't worry about the timing. I will make it work. I always do." He laughed then. It was a low, intimate sound. It was not the performative laugh he used at dinner parties. It was genuine. I stood frozen in the hallway. My mind did not immediately jump to rage. Instead, it pulled up a file of archived grievances. I remembered my 31st birthday, which he had forgotten until Facebook reminded him at dinner. I remembered the way he constantly interrupted my stories in public to correct details that did not matter. I remembered the dismissal in his eyes whenever I talked about my work. And now, hearing that tone of voice directed at someone else, I realized he was not incapable of kindness. He was just withholding it from me. I backed away silently. I went back out the front door, closed it softly, and waited inside my car for 20 minutes before walking back in as if I had just arrived. That night, while Dylan was in the shower, I sat on the edge of our bed with the family iPad. We had a shared email account, the Cross family, which we used for utility bills, mortgage statements, and invitations. Dylan rarely checked it. He relied on me to filter the noise. I refreshed the inbox. A confirmation email sat at the top, bold and unread. It was from Sable and Row, the most exclusive steakhouse in downtown Raleigh. Reservation for 2, Friday, 7 o'clock. The name on the reservation was Dylan Cross. He had made a mistake. His browser had auto-filled the shared email address instead of his personal one. I stared at the screen. My pulse did not race. My breathing remained steady. I forwarded the email to my secure personal account. Then I took a screenshot. Finally. I permanently deleted the email from the shared inbox in the trash folder. If he checked, he would see nothing. The next morning, the kitchen was bright and smelled of the dark roast coffee Dylan insisted on importing. He was adjusting his cufflinks, looking crisp and professional in his navy suit. "Hey, just a heads up," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I have that strategy offsite all day tomorrow. Total lockdown. Phones have to be off to focus on the fiscal year planning. So if I don't reply to texts, that is why." I took a sip of my tea. I looked at him over the rim of the mug. "Okay," I said. "Good luck with the planning. Yeah, it is going to be a beast," he said. He grabbed his keys and walked out the door without kissing me goodbye. Once the garage door rattled shut, I opened my laptop. I logged into the master calendar. Because I managed our lives, I had read-only access to his work calendar to coordinate vacations and doctor appointments. I scrolled to Friday. There was indeed an entry labeled Q3 Strategy Offsite. It was blocked out from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening, but the color code was wrong. I clicked on the event to see the metadata. The status next to Dylan's name was not accepted. It was declined. I read the notes attached to the decline response. They were visible only if you clicked into the event details. Dylan confirmed he can't make it due to a conflicting client emergency. I sat back in my chair. The air in the kitchen felt suddenly very cold. The invite had come from his direct supervisor. Dylan wasn't just lying to me. He was lying to his company. He was telling me he was at work so he could go to this dinner, and he was telling his boss he was with a client so he could skip the offsite. He was not just having an affair. He was constructing an alibi that required sophisticated maintenance. He was layering deceptions. I looked at the empty kitchen. A thought occurred to me, sharp and jagged. If he is working this hard to create a narrative where he is unavailable to everyone, he is not just looking for a fling, he is looking for an exit. And in every exit strategy Dylan designs, there is always a winner and a loser. If he is building a story to leave, I whispered to the empty room, then who is the villain he would need a reason to leave the safe choice? He would need to make me the problem. I closed the browser. I opened a blank Excel spreadsheet. I did not type a header for feelings or betrayal. I typed a single word in the file name box. Exit. I did not hunt for love letters or lipstick stains. I hunted for the architecture of our money. While Dylan was pretending to sleep, I sat downstairs with a pot of black coffee and logged into the bank servers. I downloaded the transaction history for the last 24 months from our joint checking account and our primary credit cards. I exported the data into a spreadsheet and began the audit. I categorized every single line item. There were the fixed costs, the mortgage, the insurance, the utilities, the groceries. Then there was a category I labeled Dylan's Optics. This included the bespoke suits, the quarterly dues for the golf club he claimed was essential for networking, the lease on his luxury sedan, and the endless client dinners that somehow never appeared on his expense reimbursement reports. The pivot table revealed a brutal truth. My base salary was covering 80% of our household overhead. Dylan's commissions, which he always bragged about, were not building our future. They were funding his lifestyle. He was living like a king on my dime while I played the role of the thrifty accountant, clipping coupons to balance the budget he was bleeding dry. I did not scream. I did not wake him up to demand an explanation. I simply opened a new browser tab. I navigated to the website of a small credit union on the other side of Raleigh, one that had no affiliation with the major banks we used. I opened a checking account in my name only. I selected the option for electronic statements only, ensuring not a single piece of paper would ever arrive at our mailbox. Then, I logged into the Blackridge payroll portal. I updated my direct deposit settings. Starting with the next pay period, 15% of my paycheck would be diverted into this ghost account. It was no longer family money. It was my war chest. Next, I compiled the dossier. I created a folder on an encrypted external hard drive. I dragged in the screenshot of the steakhouse reservation, the calendar metadata showing he had declined his work off-site, and the fresh spreadsheet of his spending habits. I was not building a scrapbook of memories. I was building a case file. At 9 o'clock in the morning, I called Sarah in Human Resources at Blackridge. I kept my voice professional, but I allowed a hint of urgency to seep in. "Sarah," I said, staring at the wall of my home office, hypothetically, if I wanted to put in for a transfer to the Chicago hub, what does that timeline look like? "Oh, wow," Sarah said. "Megan, they have been trying to get a senior operations lead in Chicago for months. If you are serious, we could probably fast-track that in 2 or 3 weeks. Keep it between us for now," I said. I am just exploring options. 2 or 3 weeks. That was my window. I spent the lunch hour running errands that felt more like tactical maneuvers. I drove to a post office 3 towns over and rented a private box. I did not want any sensitive mail coming to the house where Dylan could intercept it. When I returned home, I went into the fireproof safe in the master closet. I removed my passport, my birth certificate, and the original deed to the house, which I had purchased before the marriage. I sealed them in a waterproof document bag and hid them beneath the spare tire in the trunk of my car. It was an evacuation protocol. Then came the twist I had not anticipated. I was doing a final sweep of our credit report when I noticed an inquiry from 3 months ago. There was an American Express Platinum card active on the file. It was an authorized user account. Dylan had opened it to harvest travel points. But because of a document I vaguely remembered signing years ago to boost his credit score, the primary liability for the debt sat on my profile. I clicked into the details. He had run up $4,000 in the last month alone. If he decided to leave and stop paying, that debt was mine. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. He was funding his exit strategy using my credit score. I did not confront him. I called the number on the back of the digital card image. I navigated the automated menu until I reached the security department. I need to freeze this card. I told the representative, I suspect there might be unauthorized activity. I did not cancel it, which would trigger an immediate notification to Dylan. I just froze it. The next time he tried to swipe it for a bottle of champagne or a hotel room, it would simply decline. He would assume it was a chip error or a system glitch. By the time he figured it out, I would be gone. I updated my spreadsheet, adding a new tab titled Liability. Then I closed the laptop and pulled out my physical notebook. I uncapped my pen and wrote a single sentence on the fresh white paper. When he says I am no longer the choice, I will not warn him twice. I met Kara Jensen at a coffee shop in Durham, nearly 30 miles away from the manicured radius of our social circle. I needed to be somewhere where the baristas did not know my coffee order or my husband's golf handicap. I slid the manila folder across the scratched wooden table. Inside were the printed screenshots of the steakhouse reservation and the calendar metadata showing Dylan had declined his work off-site to be there. Kara did not gasp. She did not cover her mouth in performative shock. She flipped through the pages with the clinical detachment of a surgeon looking at an X-ray. This was why she was my emergency contact. He is sloppy, Kara said, tapping a fingernail on the paper. But forget the dinner. Megan, focus. You said he is up for a promotion. When does the new compensation package kick in? Ideally next month, I said. He is waiting for a major deal to close before they announce the title change. And the stock options she asked, the retention bonus. They vest immediately upon signing, I said. It is standard for executive contracts at Ventrelli. Kara looked me dead in the eye. Then you do not do a single thing until that ink is dry, she said. If you file for divorce today, that potential income is speculative. It is his. If you file the day after the money hits the account, it is a marital asset. We are talking about a difference of potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. I do not want to fight for money. Kara, I said, my voice wavering slightly, I just want to escape the fire without being burned alive. I want out. Freedom costs money, Kara said firmly. I am sending you an address. Her name is Renee Alvarez. She is expensive, she is cold, and she hates losing. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a glass-walled office that smelled of lemon polish and intimidation. Renee Alvarez listened to my timeline without taking a single note. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the desk. Kara is right about the vesting schedule, Renee said. Her voice was smooth and dangerously calm. We wait. But there is a second rule, Megan, and this one is non-negotiable. You cannot leave the house. I felt my stomach turn. I have to stay there, I asked. Knowing what I know. If you pack your bags and move into a hotel tonight, his legal team will spin a narrative of abandonment, Renee explained. They will say you deserted the domestic sphere. They will use it to leverage the house, the alimony, everything. You stay. You sleep in that bed. You cook dinner. You ask him how his day was. You maintain the status quo until we have the leverage to evict him. I don't know if I can look at him without screaming, I said, gripping the arms of the chair. You will, Renee said, because you are a strategist. Treat this marriage like a failing project you are managing until the contract expires. Can you do that? I took a breath. I thought about the spreadsheet named Exit. I thought about the years I had spent building Dylan's ego. I nodded. I can do it. I said. Renee finally picked up a pen. She looked at me with a sudden, sharp intensity. "One last thing," she said. "Your husband is in sales at Ventrelli. You are in operations at Blackridge. Those are two massive firms in the tech sector. Is there any professional overlap? Does he have any contact with your specific division?" I paused. I had been so focused on the domestic betrayal that I had ignored the professional landscape. "We have a joint venture starting next quarter," I said slowly. "Ventrelli's is supplying the hardware for our new logistics platform, but Dylan is usually on the client relationship side, not implementation. Check the rosters," Renee advised. "If he is mixing business with pleasure, it gives us leverage, but it also makes things dangerous for your career." I left her office and drove straight to a parking lot to check my work email on my phone. My calendar had updated with a new invite for the kickoff meeting of the joint project. It was the next meeting referenced in the project timeline. I opened the attendee list. There was Dylan's name at the top, and right below it, listed as the marketing programs manager for Ventrelli's, was a name I had seen on the guest list for the steakhouse reservation I had intercepted earlier. Brielle Vaughn. I stared at the screen. My husband was not just cheating on me. He was bringing his mistress into my boardroom. Monday morning began with the deceptive rhythm of normalcy. I was drinking my second cup of coffee and reviewing the agenda for the week when my phone vibrated against the marble countertop. It was 8:12 in the morning. The screen lit up with a notification from a number I did not recognize. The message was short, brutal, and punctuated by a single snowflake emoji. "He's mine. Stop pretending." I did not drop my phone. I did not choke on my coffee. My heart rate spiked, but my hands remained steady. I treated the text exactly as I would a suspicious anomaly in a supply chain report. I took a screenshot immediately. I swiped up to view the metadata and logged the timestamp. Then, I typed a response that was deliberately neutral, stripping away any emotion that might feed the sender's ego. "I believe you have the wrong number." The reply came 3 seconds later. The typing bubbles pulsed with an aggressive speed. "No mistake. I know you are his wife, and I know you know it is over." Then came an image attachment. It was a screenshot of a text conversation. The name at the top of the chat was saved as my future. The profile picture was Dylan. I minimized the messaging app and opened LinkedIn. I ran the phone number through a reverse search tool I used for vetting vendors, then cross-referenced the result with the employee directory for Ventrellis Dynamics. The face that stared back at me was young, polished, and terrifyingly ambitious. Brielle Vaughn, Marketing Programs Manager. She was not just a random woman. She was the project lead for the partner team. She was the woman who would be sitting across the conference table from me in exactly 4 days at the joint venture kickoff. I realized the audacity of her move. Brielle was not hiding in the shadows. She was planting a flag. By texting me directly, she was trying to provoke a reaction. She wanted me to explode, to cause a scene, to become the unstable, emotional wife that Dylan had likely painted me as. She was trying to accelerate the timeline by forcing me to be the one who burned the bridge. I looked closer at the screenshot she had sent. It was a time-stamped conversation from last night, while Dylan was supposedly asleep next to me. In the chat, Brielle had asked, "When are you going to tell her Dylan's reply was right below it? She is just a roommate at this point. She clings to the routine because it is all she has. After the signing meeting next week, I will move out. I just need to get the deal locked in first." I felt a cold clarity wash over me. The betrayal was no longer just marital. It was professional. Dylan was explicitly linking the dissolution of our marriage to the execution of a commercial contract. He was using the joint venture signing a multi-million-dollar agreement between our two companies as the trigger event for his personal exit. This created a massive conflict of interest. If his personal life plan hinged on the successful signing of this deal, he was compromised. He would say or do anything to get that signature, potentially ignoring compliance risks or unfavorable terms just to secure his bonus and his freedom. He had turned our marriage into a business dependency. I saved the image to my encrypted folder. I added Brielle's contact info to the file. I documented every word of his disparaging remarks. not to hurt my own feelings, but to establish a pattern of premeditated deception. I set my phone down and opened my laptop. I pulled up the slide deck for the upcoming meeting. It was a standard operational overview, full of graphs and timelines. I navigated to the end of the presentation. I created a new, blank slide. I made it hidden so it would not appear in the printed handouts or the preliminary version sent to the executives. I clicked on the title box and typed a single word in bold, capital letters. Risk. I saved the file. If they wanted to play games with the company's money and my life, I would ensure we played by my rules. The meeting next week was not going to be a signing ceremony. It was going to be an audit. Wednesday arrived with a bouquet of white lilies and a gift certificate to a high-end day spa. Dylan placed them on the kitchen island with the flourish of a magician performing a trick. It was a classic misdirection. He was investing in the asset right before he planned to liquidate it. "You have been working so hard, babe," he said, leaning against the counter and crossing his arms. "I booked you a full package for Saturday." "I want you relaxed." He paused, tilting his head slightly as he studied my face. "And listen," he added, his voice dropping to that smooth, coaching tone he used with junior sales reps. "For the meeting next week, I need you to really turn on the charm. Smile. Be the supportive partner. This is a massive deal for me. I need the optics to be flawless." "Of course," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was carved out of marble. "I will be perfect." I knew exactly what he was doing. He needed me docile and unsuspecting until the contract was signed. If I looked happy, no one would suspect he was about to blindside me with divorce papers. But his campaign had a second front. Later that evening, I overheard him on the phone in the sunroom. He had left the door cracked open, confident in my stupidity. "I know, Greg," Dylan was saying, his voice hushed and dripping with fake concern. "I am really worried about her. She is just so stressed lately. She overthinks everything. I feel like she is losing her grip on reality a bit. I am just trying to keep her stable until we get through this quarter." He was planting the seeds of my instability. When he eventually left me for Brielle, he would tell everyone that he had no choice, that living with me had become impossible. I walked back to the kitchen quietly. I did not confront him. I let him believe his narrative was taking root. Instead of going to the spa, I went to see Dr. Paige Monroe on Thursday afternoon. I did not go to save my marriage. I went to understand why I had stayed in it for so long. Dr. Monroe was a sharp woman with piercing eyes who did not let me hide behind corporate metaphors. I spent 20 minutes explaining Dylan's narcissism, his manipulation, and his sudden fake kindness. She stopped me with a raised hand. "Megan, stop analyzing him," she said. "Look at me. Do you actually like the man Dylan is, or do you just like the feeling of being chosen by him?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I opened my mouth to defend my history, but the words died in my throat. I sat in silence for a long time. I don't think I like him at all," I whispered. "I just liked winning. I liked being the one he picked." "Then stop playing his game," Dr. Monroe said, "and start playing yours." I left her office with a clarity that felt dangerous. I drove straight to meet Kara. We signed a short-term lease on a studio apartment in the Arts District. The lease was in Kara's name, but I paid the first 3 months of rent in cash from my secret account. It was small, smelling of fresh paint and dust, but it had a deadbolt that Dylan did not have a key to. When I got home, I tried to log into our primary investment account to check the balance. The screen flashed red. Incorrect password. I tried again. Access denied. My stomach tightened. I walked into the living room where Dylan was watching golf. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "Did you change the login for the Fidelity account I can't get in?" He didn't even look away from the TV. "Oh, yeah," he said casually. "I got a security alert, so I updated everything to be safe. I will..." I will write the new ones down for you later. Don't worry about it. He would never write them down. He was systematically locking me out of our assets before the split. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was cutting off my supply lines. He was wrong. I went back upstairs and logged into the payroll system again. I increased my direct deposit diversion to 50%. Then, I accessed the few accounts he hadn't secured yet, the utility bills and the joint checking, and I printed every single statement from the last 5 years. I didn't need his passwords to prove financial dissipation. I just needed the paper trail he had already created. My phone buzzed late that night. It was a message from my lawyer, Renee. The process server is ready for next week. Just remember one thing. When you press the button to blow this up, make sure you do it where there are witnesses. He can lie to you in private. He cannot lie to a room full of executives. I looked at the sleeping form of my husband. He looked peaceful, thinking he had won. I won't just have witnesses, I whispered into the dark. I will have an audience. Renee had the divorce petition drafted and sitting in her encrypted cloud server by Friday morning. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression, accompanied by an emergency motion for exclusive use of the marital residence and a request to sever all non-essential communication. But we could not file it yet. We were waiting for the money to become legally ours. I found the confirmation I needed on Dylan's desk, buried under a stack of golf magazines he thought I would never touch. It was a draft of his executive compensation addendum. I scanned the legal jargon until I found the vesting clause. It stated clearly that his retention bonus and the second tranche of stock options would vest exactly 48 hours after the execution of the Northgate expansion contract. That was the document we were scheduled to sign on Tuesday. If I filed for divorce on Wednesday, half of that windfall was mine. If I filed today, I walked away with nothing but the debt he had tried to pin on me. I took a photo of the document and then drove to the Blackridge office. I did not go to my desk. I went straight to the compliance department on the 4th floor. I sat down across from Marcus, our chief compliance officer. I kept my face smooth and unreadable. Hypothetically, Marcus, I said, folding my hands on my lap. If a senior stakeholder in a joint venture had an undisclosed personal relationship with a member of the partner team, and that relationship was being used to influence contract terms, what is the protocol Marcus stopped typing? He took off his glasses and looked at me. That is a serious conflict of interest, Megan. He said, if the personal relationship affects the commercial integrity of the deal, it exposes the firm to liability. It has to be disclosed. Why do you know something I am conducting a risk assessment for the Ventrelli's project? I said, carefully avoiding a direct accusation. I just need to know the procedure. If I find evidence of such a conflict, where does it belong in the presentation? It goes under risk and controls, Marcus said firmly. And if you have proof, you are obligated to stop the signing until it is investigated. Understood. I said. I went back to my desk and opened the agenda for the Tuesday meeting. I sent a note to the project manager. I will handle the risk and controls section personally. I wrote, I have identified some last-minute compliance variables we need to address before execution. The project manager approved it within 5 minutes. I had secured the floor. That afternoon, my phone vibrated again. It was Brielle. She was getting impatient. She felt the need to twist the knife she thought was already buried in my back. He is laughing about you right now, the text read. He says you are so clingy. He told me you thanked him for the flowers like a desperate puppy. Too grateful. That is what he called you. It is pathetic. She attached another screenshot of their chat. I read Dylan's words. They were cruel, dismissive, and arrogant. A month ago. Reading them would have broken me. Today, they just looked like data points. I did not block her. I did not type out a furious paragraph calling her a homewrecker. I needed her to feel safe. I needed her to keep generating the evidence that would destroy her career. Thank you for sending this evidence, I replied. Keep it exactly as it is. She probably thought I was bluffing. She sent back a laughing emoji. I connected my phone to my laptop. I did not just save the photos. I used a forensic software tool to export the entire chat history into a PDF file, complete with timestamps, sender IDs, and metadata. I wanted to make sure that when Dylan claimed I had fabricated the messages in a fit of jealousy, I could prove that the files originated from his girlfriend's device. I opened the PowerPoint deck for the meeting. I navigated to the hidden slide I had created. I embedded the PDF. I embedded the photos. I arranged them not as a collage of heartbreak, but as a timeline of corporate malfeasance. The office was empty. The cleaning crew was vacuuming the hallway outside. I sat alone in the dim light of my cubicle and opened the video conferencing software we would use on Tuesday. I moved my cursor over the green button at the bottom of the screen. Share screen. I clicked it. The border of my screen turned green, indicating that everything I saw was being broadcast to the invisible room. I watched it for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. Then I clicked, stop sharing. It did not feel like a button on a computer anymore. It felt like the trigger of a loaded gun, and my finger was already on it. The week leading up to the signing felt like holding my breath underwater. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a pressure chamber waiting to equalize. Dylan was vibrating with a frantic sort of confidence. He paced around the kitchen, talking about the commission checks he had already mentally spent. "We are going to the Capitol Grill after the signing tomorrow," he told me on Monday night, leaning against the refrigerator while I loaded the dishwasher. "The whole team is going to be there. Brielle, the VPs, everyone. You have to come. Megan. It is a victory lap. I need you on my arm." He did not ask. He commanded. To him. My presence was just another accessory, like his watch or his tie. "I will be there," I said, not looking up from the plates. I had already chosen my outfit for the day. I was not going to wear the soft pastels or the floral prints Dylan preferred. I had selected a charcoal gray sheath dress with sharp architectural lines and a pair of black stilettos that clicked like a gavel against the floor. I was not dressing to be his wife. I was dressing to be his executioner. While Dylan was at the gym that afternoon, Kara came over. We moved with the efficiency of a pit crew. We did not take furniture or jewelry. We took only the essentials. I handed her a single plastic bin containing my birth certificate, my passport, my laptop, and the notebook labeled Exit. "Is this it?" Kara asked, looking at the sparse collection of my life. "That is everything that matters," I said. She carried the box out to her trunk. I watched her drive away, feeling a strange lightness in my chest. I sat in my car for a moment and drafted a text message to my parents and my brother. I did not send it. I saved it as a draft, ready to be deployed the moment the meeting ended. I am safe. I have left Dylan. Please do not answer his calls. I will explain everything when I can. I went back inside and checked my personal email. A notification from Blackridge HR was sitting at the top of the inbox. My request for the transfer to the Chicago hub had been approved. The subject line read, "Transfer authorization, effective immediately." I stared at the words, effective immediately. I could leave right now. I could get in my car, drive north, and never look back. I could let Dylan have his signing, his bonus, and his mistress. I could disappear and let him spin whatever story he wanted about his crazy wife who vanished in the middle of the night. But if I left now, he would win the narrative. He would paint me as unstable. He would be the victim. "No," I said to the empty room. "He does not get to write the ending." That evening, I was walking past the study when I heard Dylan's voice. The door was cracked open just an inch. He was on the phone, and his tone was light, dismissive, dripping with arrogance. "Don't worry about her," Dylan was saying, and then he laughed. She wouldn't dare do anything. Honestly, I think she knows deep down that she needs me. Who else is going to take care of her?" I stopped. I stood in the hallway, listening to my husband explain my dependency to his mistress. A month ago, that sentence would have devastated me. It would have sent me spiraling into insecurity. But standing there in the dark hallway, I felt nothing. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was only a hollow, echoing space where my love for him used to be. I walked away without making a sound. My only thought was cold and absolute. You have misjudged the person living in your house. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Renee. I reviewed the final vesting schedule. Tomorrow, after the meeting. The assets vest. The day after, we file. You just need to keep a normal face for another 24 hours. I looked at the message. 24 hours. I could do anything for 24 hours. I went upstairs, brushed my teeth, and climbed into bed next to the man who thought he owned me. I closed my eyes and slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a woman who knows exactly what she is going to do when the sun comes up. Tuesday morning began with the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. The kitchen was filled with the smell of burnt toast and ambition. Dylan was scrolling through his phone at the island, checking the pre-market stock numbers. He looked like a man who had already won the lottery and was just waiting to cash the ticket. "Do you want coffee?" I asked, my hand hovering over the French press. Dylan didn't look up. He just gave a vague, dismissive nod. "Yeah." "Keep it black," he said, his eyes glued to the screen. "I need the caffeine." Big day. I poured the coffee into his favorite mug. I placed it next to his hand. He took it without a thank you, taking a sip with the unconscious entitlement of a man who has been served his entire life. He had no idea that this was the last cup of coffee I would ever pour him. I arrived at the Blackridge office 45 minutes before the meeting. The floor was quiet. I went to my desk, docked my laptop, and opened the virtual conference room. I clicked on the Settings tab to verify my permissions. The system confirmed what I already knew. I was the host. I controlled the mute buttons. I controlled the waiting room. And most importantly, I controlled the screen sharing rights. At 8:50. The first notification chimed. Brielle Vaughn had joined the meeting 10 minutes early. Her camera flicked on instantly. She was sitting in a conference room at Ventrelli, wearing a white blazer that looked sharp enough to cut glass. Her expression was icy. She looked at the camera, likely expecting to see Dylan, but she saw me. "Good morning. Brielle," I said. My voice was pleasant, professional, and completely hollow. "Megan." She replied. She didn't smile. She just adjusted her headset and looked down at her notes, dismissing me. 5 minutes later, the screen populated with the faces of the senior leadership teams from both companies. And then, Dylan joined. His video feed was bright. He was practically vibrating with energy. "Good morning, everyone," Dylan announced, his voice booming through the speakers. "Great to see the full team here. We are looking at a massive win today." I watched him closely. His eyes darted briefly to the tile where Brielle sat, a microscopic check-in, before returning to the camera. He thought he was being subtle. He thought they were invisible. "Let's get started," I said. I ran through the first 20 minutes of the presentation with lethal efficiency. I covered the operational timelines, the supply chain logistics, and the integration milestones. I spoke with the steady, monotonous cadence of a seasoned bureaucrat. I could see the executives relaxing. Shoulders dropped. Someone took a sip of water. They were lulled into the boredom of a standard corporate procedure. They thought the deal was done. I reached the end of the logistics section. "That covers the operational framework," I said. Suddenly, Dylan's voice cut in. "Great stuff, Meg." "Really detailed," he said, leaning into his microphone with a charming grin. "Why don't you pass the ball to me? I can share the partner revenue projections and we can wrap this up." He reached for his mouse. He wanted to take control of the screen. He wanted to own the room for the victory lap. I did not pass the ball. "Actually, Dylan, please, hold on," I said. My voice was not loud, but it stopped him cold. According to the approved agenda, the risk and controls assessment is the next mandatory item. I have the floor. The room went quiet. It was a small breach of protocol, a wife correcting a husband in front of the board. The VP of Compliance at Blackridge sat up straighter in his chair. Dylan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. "Right. Of course, he said, waving a hand dismissively. Go ahead. Let's tick the boxes. I pressed the arrow key. The slide changed. The screen went stark white with a single word in bold, black letters in the center. Risk. I looked directly into the camera lens. I imagined I was looking into Dylan's soul. Before we proceed to the signing, I said, my voice clear and steady, we need to address a critical compliance issue. I have identified a significant conflict of interest that creates potential legal liability for both firms. It concerns the integrity of the contract negotiation itself. Dylan was still smiling, but his eyes had gone confused. He didn't understand. He thought I was talking about a supply chain vendor or a software glitch. He was still waiting for his applause. I moved my mouse. The cursor hovered over the green share screen button. My heart beat a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. He was still smiling. He had absolutely no idea he was already falling. I pressed the button. The white slide vanished, replaced instantly by the high-resolution PDF of the text thread. It was massive on the screen, unavoidable and crisp. The first message at the top was the one from Sunday morning. He's mine. Below it were the timestamps and Dylan's own words promising to leave his wife immediately after the contract vested, along with his mockery of my gratitude. I did not sound like a scorned wife. I sounded like an auditor. This is documentation of a personal relationship between the Ventrelli's project lead and a senior stakeholder, I said, my voice steady. The correspondence indicates that the timing of this contract execution is being manipulated to facilitate a personal financial exit strategy. This constitutes a material conflict of interest and a violation of our ethical compliance standards. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Then Marcus, the chief compliance officer, spoke up. His voice was sharp. Stop the signing, Marcus commanded. We need to pause this process immediately. This is now an internal investigation. Nobody signs anything. The atmosphere in the virtual room shifted instantly from a celebration to a crime scene. Dylan's face went pale, then flushed a deep, angry red. He leaned into his camera, his eyes wide. Megan, stop this, he shouted, his voice cracking. This is a fabrication. She is having a breakdown. I told you she was unstable. She is under a lot of stress. I did not argue. I simply clicked to the next slide. It displayed the forensic metadata of the images, the export logs, and the email verification linking the phone number directly to Brielle Vaughn's corporate device. These are not fabrications, I said. These are court-admissible digital forensics. Then I delivered the final blow. I brought up the financial cross-reference. Furthermore, I continued, I have cross-referenced Mr. Cross's expense reports with our joint bank statements. Multiple client dinners listed in the project budget were actually paid for using marital funds during dates that coincide with the personal meetings described in the text logs. This is dissipation of assets. I looked directly at Dylan's pixelated face. He was frozen, his mouth slightly open, the arrogance completely drained from his eyes. Dylan, I said, addressing him for the first time, you told your partner that I would not dare do anything. You said I was too grateful to act, so I have to ask you, what are you seeing right now? He said nothing. He couldn't speak. On the screen, Brielle's camera feed suddenly cut to black. She had disconnected. She ran. Mr. Cross, Marcus said, his voice cold. Please disconnect from this call. HR will be in touch with you within the hour. Do not return to the office until instructed. The image of the winner, the man who lived for optics, shattered in real time before 20 witnesses. I ended the meeting. 10 minutes later, I received an automated email. Because the date had passed and the vesting event was tied to the scheduled completion of the project phase, the system had processed the vesting of his retention bonus and stock options. The money was locked in. I texted Renee 2 words, file it. The electronic divorce petition was submitted to the court clerk 3 minutes later. The process server, who was already waiting in the lobby of the Vontrelli building, walked toward the elevators to hand Dylan the papers just as security was likely escorting him out. My phone began to light up. Dylan was calling, then texting. The messages shifted rapidly from threats to confusion, and finally to desperate pleading. "Megan, please, we can fix this. Don't do this. I love you." I did not reply. I turned off my location sharing. I logged into the banking app and saw that the freeze on the accounts had been initiated by the filing. I walked to the elevator, rode it down to the lobby, and walked out into the sunlight. I drove to the small studio apartment in the Arts District. It was quiet. There were no golf magazines. There were no suits to dry clean. I sat down at the small wooden desk and opened the notebook I had bought weeks ago. I picked up a pen and turned to the first blank page. I wrote 5 words. He is not mine. I am mine. I closed the book. It was done. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment your location below and let's share our thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by more people.